Hello and welcome to this quick video on setting up a project in Maya, making sure your units are set properly, and bringing in reference images, or image planes for that matter, into Maya to be able to start to build your asset too, if you choose to use reference images, your concept art, as a reference live in Maya here. So let's start by taking a look at setting up the project. So I'm going to go to the File menu. Down below we have this project setting, or section for that matter. I'm going to go to Project Window, and I want to build a new project. So I'm actually going to hit New, and it's going to open up the accessibility of this current project and the location. Make sure you dial in where the location is. In my case, I have a shared in folder 2018-2019, so that's fine by me, but I do want to call the project something else. So in this case, I'm going to, just like I did it as an example in class, I'm going to use this battle axe idea, and I'm going to leave everything the same that's in here, and I'll just hit accept. Now a good practice is to always go back to File, go to Set Project right over here underneath the project window, and make sure you click on that project right there. Click it and hit Set. Now I know that I am set into that project, and I can work with it. So next, let's look at making sure that our grid work is set up properly here. Now, I'm going to be building something that, that little battle axe example that I was working with, and I might want to use something that is, maybe the prop itself is around, let's say, for example, 2 feet in height. I'm going to be building in metric though, so 12 inches is a foot, which is actually pretty much equivalent to 30 centimeters. So in this case, I want to use 60 centimeters as kind of the height of that overall axe, and we'll figure out the width with the reference images here. But with that, I want to make sure that my scale is set properly. So if you recall, if we go up to Windows, Settings Preferences, and Preferences, that we can come into a preference window, click on Settings, and there's the basic working units. By default, it is set to centimeters. Remember, we can go in and change that to whatever we want. I'm going to leave it at centimeters. That gives me exactly what I need to do. Because I'm not changing anything in here, I'm just going to hit the X here, or I could hit Save here as well. And that's fine. If we recall where our units are, we use this grid as our visual reference while we're working. If I left click on this, it's going to turn that grid on and off. If I right click, I'll go to Grid Options, just by right click and then left clicking on Grid Options. I can see that this here is set to 100 units by grid lines every 10 units. Now what that means, if you recall, is that really we are referencing only one quadrant in this view. Okay, so what that means is that we have, I'm looking kind of top down here, so we have X running in this direction, and we have Z running backwards in this direction. Of course, X runs back and forth, so we have X positive and X negative here, and Z negative here, and Z positive, leading towards the front of everything in here. And I can also see down below on the left there that we have Y, and I'm looking straight down Y right now for that. So with these settings though, this is really only concerned with one quadrant on this grid. So right now we have this set to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, that's because it actually is 100 units, but it's only displaying grid lines every 10 units. If I put that to every 1 units, I'm going to see exactly, now we have to hit apply, anything that we change on here. So I'll just hit apply. Now we see this gets much more dense because this is displaying 100 units in width, length and width, but by every 1 unit. So in this case here, that's probably too much for what I'm going to need when I'm working here. If I know that the height of this axe is going to be something like around 60 centimeters, then I might want to think of the full width and size of my overall display. I'm going to go a little bit bigger than I need. I'm actually going to set it to 35 units, and I'm going to do grid lines every 1 unit, or 1 centimeter for that matter. I'll hit apply. It's not that bad now, not as dense. So I now know that I have 35 units going this way and 35 going that way, which is going to give me a total range of 70 units. So I have a working height and width of 70 units here. I'm going to go close and come down to my front and my side view, because I'm going to be using this quite a bit. And I now know that that is set to what I need it to be. 35 units, grid lines every 1 unit, hit apply, yep, we're in that, that's fine. And if I go over to side, it's the same difference, top, same deal. So the difference is now that we just have our units set, so we know we're ready to go with this. If we go back to the perspective viewport, or for that matter, any viewport, we will see a couple things up top above the viewport that are really helpful for us. And that's moving into the next thing that we want to do is work with image planes. Now, image planes let you bring in art that you can use to model to, or for that matter, model from. And you can use them as guidelines for art overall, or for proportion, size, scale, whatever it may be. We'll see this in a moment here. I'm going to bring in some example art. Now, if I click on this in here, it's going to be working specifically to the camera that I'm working in. That's important to remember. So let's click this for a moment. In perspective, by default, it's going to look at the project I'm working with, which is my Battle Axe project, but it's going to look in that source images directory. I don't have anything in there, but I do have, let's see if I can find them here, these two guys. I'm just going to right click, cut, go into Battle Axe, go into source images, and paste that in there. So now they're in the source images. So I'll just close that. If I were to click this again, by default, it's going to find those in the source images. But I'm purposely going to do the wrong thing here, because I guarantee at some point you will forget to go by camera and you will grab an image and you'll say, why does it look like this? Well, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to bring the front view of this artwork here. This artwork's done by Dan Dunford. It's just a simple Battle Axe concept. I'm going to hit open, and you'll see that it's going to put it dead center of the view that I'm in. Now, if I hold down Alt and left click and tumble around, you'll notice that nothing's happening with the artwork. It's tumbling around. That is because I'm viewing that artwork through the camera that I'm in. In this case, it's perspective. So perspective doesn't really necessarily have a plane per se. We're always viewing through that camera. So I actually don't want that. I'm going to delete that and get out of there. And then I'm going to spacebar, go into the front view, and make sure that I'm in my front view here so that I can bring the artwork into the front view that I want, which, if we remember in Maya, is viewing in Z or Z, so that we're viewing down that plane, that axis. And just like that, in side view is X, and we can see that on the bottom as well. So I want to use these two, front and side, to bring in my reference imagery. So I'm going to go back to front, and now I'm going to click this little icon with this grid with this little perpendicular blue plane. It's going to bring me to that source images directory. I know I'm in the front view. I can see this down below. So I'll hit front and then just click open. Now it's going to bring it into my view. And what we can see before I do anything, I'm just going to click into the viewport here, is that it's brought our artwork in. If I click this and go back to the perspective view now, you'll see that that is locked to that plane. That is that when I look down the Z plane, I can see that reference image or that reference art. If I look down X, I can see it, but I'm not really seeing anything in the ortho view directly down there. So a couple of things on this. First of all, I can see that if I go back to my front view, we're only looking at around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, around 16, maybe 15 centimeters of scale. So it's actually too small for what I want. If you recall, I want to build this thing. I want it to be around, around 60 centimeters in height. So I really do kind of want to look at the tip of that axe there, and I don't know if I'll model that ring there, but maybe somewhere around the bottom of this part here. I want to scale those guys to represent something that is around that 60 centimeters in height. So simply put, I can just swipe left click swipe, and use my R key to access scale. And I can actually just arbitrarily scale this to what I want it to be. What I'm going to pay attention to is how high I'm scaling this up. So right now I have it at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So I may want to go much higher than that. Someplace around here. If I count that out, that's probably going to give me much better scale as to what I want in there. That should be good for what I want. But another thing that we want to do, I want to make sure that I'm lining this up down the center of this grid. You can see that the top of this axe, if I zoom in, is not lining up with the top and the bottom. Now, maybe this artwork, maybe it's off. It looks like it's okay down there, but I'm going to hit W, and I'm actually just going to move this artwork over so that it follows somewhat. It doesn't have to be right on dead exact, but somewhat to that line going down the middle. And that'll help me if I'm using symmetry while I'm modeling in here. You can even rotate it. If you had to, you could rotate this if you needed to adjust that artwork. But that's fine right now. I don't know if that's exactly the size that I want in here, but this is giving me pretty much enough scale-wise in units here that I'm going to get pretty darn close to what I want to build. And as I get to the end of my prop, I can formally, accurately scale it to be exactly that height if I knew for sure the prop had to be 60 centimeters in height, for example, and whatever this width equals to here. Okay, so we've got that there. I'm actually going to come out of there, go back to my perspective view, and you can see now we have this view of a much bigger prop in there. If we go to our side view, we can't see anything because we're looking at the slice of that plane from the side. So let's bring in some side art. So I'm going to grab this one here. I'm going to bring in the side, and I'll click open. And it's going to give me that view. If I click away from it here, we'll see that now in both views, I get both artwork. Of course, we need to address the scale of this here. But the easiest way to do that is to come back, and we see that I scaled this up around 5. I'm going to actually make the front artwork exactly 5, just so it's going to make life a little easier here for me if I grab the side view and numerically scale that one by 5. And there, we can now see that if I can see the side view looking through here, I might need to address this art. It looks like it needs to be brought over a little bit. Just so the top is at the top of the grid here. I'm just going to bring that into the middle, so that's fine. And then if I go to my perspective view, I'm able to see the front view here and the side view here in perspective. So that's really helpful. That's really good. I'm happy with the way that's set up, so that'll let me have the what I need for if I'm modeling here with these image planes, and if I need to switch back and forth to perspective, I can see them, simply put, I can see them back and forth in there. So there's a quick way of setting up your project, making sure your units are set up in Maya, and bringing in image planes. You definitely want to start with, at minimum, a front view and a side view. That's always the best way to work with this. Another thing, just a tip, is that some people don't necessarily like to work with this in this manner of having a side view overlapping with that front view. If that's the case, you can simply grab one of these and pull it out here and maybe push this one back. So you're actually kind of building more of a reference box than you are an overlapping art. And your prop asset will be here in the middle, and when you view it in perspective, it'll line up to that art there. Now, the basic way that I always prefer to start is right here in the center. We can always move these image planes at any time. And to note with that, you'll notice if I bring up the quad view and I move this image plane, this front view, back in that space, it doesn't affect the scale or the size of it here. Likewise with this side view as well. It's not going to affect your view of this. It's not going to affect your modeling at all. So I'm going to leave mine right there at the origin 0 and 0. I hope that was helpful to you. That's the starting point of the video. Now we'll move on to working with some poly modeling tools.